So live stream has started. Will start in a minute. Okay, we're good to go. We have a quorum. Welcome to councillors and to members of the public, and also to those joining us on live stream. We don't have any Zoom attendees. We do have apologies from Councillor Kett, Reverend Cook, and Councillor Ludlow for lateness, and also Councillor Pottinger has an appointment at 3:45. So could I have someone move and second? Thanks, Steve. Seconded. Leslie, all those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Any declarations of interest in regard to the agenda today? Alan?
Well, maybe deem it over.
Speak up.
I'm probably on public excluded.
Right,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
We'll note that then, thank you. Okay, we do have public forum, so I'd like to welcome Victor West up to... Victor, someone will come and guide you to the speaking. Put his hand on it so he knows where it is.
Right, okay.
Yeah, welcome, Victor.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you much, Mr. Chairman, fellow councillors. This is an issue. Okay. Just sorry, we're about to say okay. Thank you much, Mr. Chairman, fellow councillors. This is an issue that I hope I can put to bed once and for all. It's been around for quite a while, but well, it's all about the safety for blind and visually impaired people I'm talking about, and let's be clear about the issue. The locator beacons are those on the pedestrian panel. It beeps constantly, so it's able to guide people to the pedestrian crossing panel so they can push the button to go across. It's not the cross now signal we're talking about. So I've found that a lot of variation in the volume, and I've constantly rang the request for service to have this looked at and see if we can get some sort of, I don't expect a whole lot of them to be, you know, right up there all the time, but at least get a majority of them to be working properly. And I'll give you an idea. If you're walking towards them, say, with about 15 feet or so, you should be able to, if you're walking on the right-hand side of the street, you can hear one beeping and immediately in front of you, and slightly to the left, there'd be one beep. So you'd hear one beep and then another one beep directly in front of you. So that gives you the direction. Of course, if you're on the other side, you'll hear one sort of coming up on your right, and there'll be one more or less on the left, so one straight ahead, sorry. But anyway, so I did put in a request for service, and I got a call back from council saying there'd been some complaints about the sound, and I said I did recall something happened many years ago when they were making some complaints, but really speaking, this is all about our safety, and we really need to be operating efficiently during the daytime at least, but we will concede that they need to be turned down during the late evening, and now we certainly wouldn't be around, the late hours of night or early hours in the morning, but they can be turned down at that point. But they need to be operating surely during the daytime, and that's what I'm requesting, that they really need to sort of have some standard volume setting. To give you an idea, on the corner of Kelvin and Esk, where the Kelvin Hotel is, I went round there and they're quite not too bad. And I went over to the corner of H.J. Smith's, the corner of Kelvin and Tay Street. They seem to be operating quite well, but there's not many others like that around, apart from, of course, the Lindisfarne one is working pretty well. But there are others too, but there's a lot really have to be sort of fumbling around looking for the crossing. I can't hear them a lot of times. So I'm just hoping we get some sort of, get this issue of the locator beacons, get some sort of standard of volume on up a little bit more, because it's pointless having them the way some of them are. I just don't know why so many of them are down. It's the greater majority, I would say, are not working properly. Thank you.
Okay. Look, thank you very much, Victor, for coming along today and for making us aware of this. Obviously, it's a really important issue for the visually impaired community, and us that have vision obviously would be less aware of it. So thank you very much for raising it. I'll take questions from councillors if there's any.
Okay.
Councillor Pottinger.
Would these be questions for Victor or questions of staff?
Questions for Victor.
For Victor, okay. Victor, with your past experience in the various forms of hearing aid enhancement and assisting equipment for the deaf, has anyone instructed you on the rules and regulations around APS systems? Because I see online that there are regulations on how loud, how many decibels they're supposed to be, and how loud you can hear them. So basically, anyone who provides this system should follow these rules. Have you ever come across or been told the rules?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. No, that's fine.
Pretty
Thanks,
technical question to expect a visitor to answer.
still a
So
question.
Victor, don't feel bad that you don't know the answer to that question. But I think your point, Councillor Pottinger, is that there are standards that there will be for these types of apparatus to ensure they are effective for the communities they're meant to be there for. So thank you for making that point. Tom, Councillor Campbell, and then Councillor Soper.
Hi Victor, Tom Campbell here. Victor, do you feel as though this is a problem which has got worse over time, or has it always been this way?
Sorry, I'll have to ask you to repeat that.
Sorry. Do you think this problem has got worse over time?
Just those last two words, sorry.
Worse?
Do you think the problem's got worse? You're not rolling your R's enough, Tom.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
So it's always been poor?
Well, I guess in one sense the other problem, I think, is the volume of the traffic has probably got a little bit bigger too. Now that's probably another problem, that you're battling with the traffic sound too a wee bit, and that's probably another reason that you need to be careful, because I've actually walked on the road a couple of times that I've missed the crossing and I finished up on the road. Fortunately, I didn't get knocked over, but I just a few feet, and somebody yelled out to me to get back on the footpath, so that's a bit of a wake-up call.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Soper.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, Vic. Leslie
Hello.
Soper.
Yes.
Can you tell me which you think are the worst offenders of the crossings? Are there particular ones that are particularly bad?
That's a big question, that one, because there's really, really bad. I just can't really, there's so many there that I could sort of point out, you know, that really, there's one there that I used to come out of the library and I used to turn left. I'd walk down a road and I could hear I could hear it beeping, so I could turn right straight away and go towards the crossing. But now I find when I went down there, I couldn't, it took me a while to latch onto it. It didn't seem, I just stood there and waited, could hear it before I could go, and I couldn't hear it. And since so I don't know what's happened there, but I know it was seen to be operating a while ago before they started working. They'd done a lot of work around that area. I don't know whether they, and now that I go there, and I find it very difficult to find it. Yeah, so that's one crossing I'm talking about out of quite a minute. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Victor.
Thank you.
Look, there's no, oh, Pania, sorry.
Kia ora, Victor. Hey, is there, just to build on the question from Councillor Soper, is there, would you be looking at having devices or something that will be helpful for you at all main CBD type intersections or places, or is there just a handful that would be of importance?
No, look, I'm sorry, I can't quite get all the question, I'm sorry.
The question was really around having some sort of warning or a device or
Yeah,
something.
I think I can clarify that. So the lights have the devices in them
Yeah, I
already.
know, but they're not
What
loud.
Victor's saying is that the noise, the level of sound coming out of them isn't at a sufficient level to be able to determine where they are in position. Is that correct, Victor? So you're saying, look, they need to be louder so you can hear them when you're coming down the street as to where the crossing is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, okay, thank you. Look, no further questions. Victor, we really appreciate you coming in today
Okay, look, thanks very much.
to
Chairman.
share. Just if you sit there, one of the staff will come and guide you
Okay.
to your seat and your bag.
Okay,
But thank you very much for coming along. Okay. Okay, so we'll move to item 4. There is a major late item, which is the acceptance, or the temporary road closure for Great South Night of the Arts on the 16th of May. Can I have someone move and
Move that.
thanks, Leslie, seconded. Barry, all those in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. Okay, minutes of the infrastructure and projects meeting for the 4th of March. We'll take those as read. Is there any questions or points of clarification with those minutes? Pania?
Just on page
Can you
8,
speak into your microphone, please?
I'm trying to stuck.
Oh, well, can we get someone to unstuck it?
Okay, it's just on page 8, down under 8 point proposed right of way name.
What page are you on?
Page 8.
Um,
Page 8, yep.
8, correct. Just into that, where it's been noted in response to a question regarding Te Reo and that mana whenua would be consulted first, it was noted this would only be if Te Reo names had been chosen. I just want to make comment, I noticed down below, but further, it was more than just that. That was proposed by council at the beginning to have a list of names, but we had agreed not to provide a list, but to be notified when work was to be done, and we would actually consider a name in a timely manner that was related to the whakapapa and history of that piece of land. So I don't think that reflected it.
So
Within the minutes.
the comment that you've, or the point you've raised isn't reflected in the minutes accurately?
Yes, correct.
Okay. So we've recorded that. Thank you. Okay, I just have one comment, and it's on page 5 of 8 of the report. re the recycling bin inspection. Just want to hand a bouquet to the waste net there. We had a bin inspected last week, I think, and they're leaving tags on the bins with you need to do better or you're doing well, and I think that came across really positively. I was a wee bit nervous when I had a tag on my bin, so I took a while to read what it said, and it said I'm doing well, so I'm pleased about that. But I think it was really well worded, so I think it's, you know, all through that project, I think we were worried that we were just going to be sort of looking to sort of catch the infringers and treat them, but it's great to see we're reinforcing good behaviour as well, so well done to the staff on
I
that.
got a nice note in Dunedin at the weekend that said parking, fine. I'll leave that with you for a second.
Welcome, Councillor Ludlow. Okay, so no further questions. Can I have a mover and seconder for those minutes, please? Trish, and thanks, Steve. No final points. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Okay, item 5 is the seal extension for Staunton Road. Doug.
Through you, Chair, kia ora. This report covers a request from the committee to cost the seal extension for Staunton Road and Fowler Road. We've covered those costs and emphasised that this is unsubsidised expenditure should we proceed, and we've done a number of different types of options.
Yes, I'll take the report as read. What I want to do with this is, with the options that are highlighted on page 3 or 4 of the report, I want to get a feeling from the committee around, do we want to do nothing or something? Because that then informs what we do next. If we've got a view that we want to do nothing, obviously it's pretty clear we're not going to consider any options. But if we've got an appetite for doing something, bearing in mind that the report outlines a varying degree of doing something, from a low cost to a higher cost. So what's the committee's thoughts, perspectives on nothing or something in terms of our action? Tom?
I think this is probably the wrong year to ask. I would rather that we did it properly when we could afford to do it properly, and I don't think this is actually the year when we can. So when I read about the middling options, I thought, well, that sort of gets us by for a little while, but I don't think it actually resolves the real problem. The road's near sealed. This is just not a year when we've got money to do it.
Okay, thank you. Other perspectives and points of view? Alan, then Mayor Clark.
I agree with Councillor Campbell that I just think it's not the right time to do it at the moment, but I agree that it should be done. It should be done, but I would like to see it done within an existing roading budget as well. I don't see why it needs to be extra. I think it just needs to be fitted into the existing budgets. And if that can be done with it, it could be done sooner.
Okay, so you would be in favour of, if it can be done with an existing budget, then we're doing something, otherwise we're doing nothing.
Well,
Is that how I summarise
just
what
at
you've said?
this time, because I just don't think we have the funds to do it. I mean, we're cutting back on a lot of things.
Yeah, okay. Mayor Clark and then Councillor Soper.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. So at the last meeting, I raised the issue that I've been over that road about, I don't know, 1,500 times probably. And I guess the submitter raised the issue, not necessarily of sealing, but also raised the issue of whether the gravel that was put on the road could be of a different take, that didn't have so much dust in it. My experience of Staunton, I can't speak for Fowler, is that widening the road would not be necessary because it's not a high traffic road. Very rarely strike cars coming the other way. People just leave first thing in the morning, come back at night time. And we have other needs as well. So we've got obviously a Maori Road down by the village, has been raised many times with us. We've got Hurahu in the back of Ototara, and also at the top end of Black Road in Ototara, which creates a huge amount of dust for a new subdivision there, and they constantly raise as well. So I'm like Tom, I think if we're going to do it, we should fix it properly, but it doesn't come cheap. Those figures we've got in the report just for the type of sealing, which is the short-term sealing, and the widening of the road is about $1.5 million.
And my view of Staunton Road, and I said this at the meeting, was that from my recollection, I think there's only one new house in there in the last 6 years. So the people that moved there and have been there long term knew that they were moving to an environment with a gravel road. It's not as hugely expanded and there's a whole lot more traffic. So I'm a little bit like Tom. I think if we're going to seal it, we should seal it, and anything in the interim is wasted money.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. So Doug, just on the point the Mayor's raised there with regard to the type of aggregate that's used on the road, is that an easy thing to do from a cost perspective? Like when we're updating it with, because we will put gravel on it from time to time, can we transition it to a less dusty option? Is that?
Through you, Chair, we can investigate that. We generally have one fairly solid source of aggregate in in the local region here.
Yeah.
We can certainly investigate others. I think that's a short-term solution, and with any aggregate there's going to be fines, and those fines are going to travel.
Yes.
The only thing that will bind them would be some binding agent or water, and that's really the only solutions we have with regard to that. Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that, Councillor Sophie.
Thanks, Mr Chair. It's good that the submitters raised the issue, but it really just adds to the context that we've got several of these roads, and I particularly mention a Maui because it's been raised with us a number of times, that we need to look at in a prioritisation order, and my feeling would be addressing one isolated one at this time is not the way to proceed when we know we've got several to prioritise.
Okay, thank you. Others? So I'm taking it then, given those that have spoken, that we are, in terms of the options that are on page 3, the recommendation that we're giving consideration to is option 1, council maintains the existing level of service, which then informs the decision we have to make, which is a recommendation to council on 2. So we maintain the current unsealed road surface on Stanton and Fowler roads. So we wouldn't be doing request to staff to proceed with design work on chip seal and odour seal. So any views before we put those 2 recommendations or call for a mover and seconder? Darren, then Alex, then Mayor Clark.
Thanks, Chair. Is it possible for us to place it on a list for consideration when we next go through and review? I don't want to see it go nowhere. It just needs to find its priority.
So you could be thinking about an amendment to 2 that included that recommendation to council. Will I take the other questions? Do you want to do that for me? Alex?
Thank you, Chair. Will we be able to roll this into the next NLTP for funding consideration, so that then we can have potential for 50% of it funded, and then look at the residents and see whether or not they would be able to contribute a part payment towards it? Like, is there some sort of shared model we could look at?
Through you, Chair. Councillor, there's one of 2 options, I guess. If we get NLTP funding, obviously council has to match that funding for seal extensions.
Yep.
We weren't fortunate in this particular round. Other cities do a 50-50 share. We've done quite a bit of research on this, and particularly with new developments and lifestyle blocks, the point is taken that they're looking for a rural outlook, but the condition of the road does get more heavily used, and the impact is quite grave at times. So yes, I think that is an option. We certainly be looking for seal extension work. I think council's realised that we have a lot of unsealed roads in the district, and as the city's expanded, those roads are taking more traffic, so we have these problems all the time.
So Doug, just to clarify, when is that next round of funding bid?
We've just, through you, Chair, we've just completed it, so be 2 years away.
So 2 years' time. Okay, thank you.
Or prior to that, should I say. But
So
yeah,
I can just add
Yep.
that the NLTP funding almost corresponds with our long-term plan funding cycle. We usually have that submitted at about the time we provide council with the first cut of the long-term plan, is about the same time that we submit our NLTP funding requests through to central government.
Yeah, so if we defer or stay with option one, recommendation 2, then it's a 2-year wait for the residents before anything's
Essentially,
given
until we get
considered
funding.
next.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Clark.
I was just going to recommend 1 and 2.
Pardon?
I was just going to recommend 1 and 2
Yeah, no,
when you're ready.
Steve's got to speak to it first.
Oh, no, thanks, Joe. I was just really supporting Councillor Ludlow. I grew up on a gravel road in Wrightsbush, and so I'm very sympathetic. It's still gravel, by the way, but just an amended option 2 potentially, just to make sure it's added to a priority list, and there's clarity for the residents, I think would be really important, so they understand where it is in that priority.
Yeah, cool. Rhea, did you want to talk?
I'm of the same appetite as Councillor Ludlow, and the reason being too for that is it's important that we don't miss this when it becomes a priority in the future, even though Doug has told us that there is provisions there for this to be delayed and come into the budget year of the National Land Transfer Program. But other than that, you know, roading is actually part of our core infrastructure. I wouldn't like to see us completely ignore that this is needed, which is why I support Councillor Ludlow's appetite in this.
Yeah, I think that the sentiment from the committee is that, look, we acknowledge the community's request, and we acknowledge the need to get this done. There are other, you know, competing demands, and it's a very tough time, you know, from a financial perspective, so we aren't able to do it currently, but we want to flag it, put it on the radar, and make sure we don't miss it in the next opportunity around road transport funding and council funding. So Darren, I'll take, there's no more comments, so Darren, do you want to have a go at rewording or adding to the wording of recommendation?
Adding to it, and looks to place the roads onto the list. I've sent a copy of this to you, Liz. Looks to place the roads onto the list of those for consideration at the next LTP review and LTP funding round.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, that hasn't come through yet. Too many words, sorry.
Looks to place the roads on the list for consideration at the next LTP review / NLTP funding round.
Needs an end before the looks.
And,
Yeah.
yes, true.
Are you happy with that? Okay, so I've got Darren moved. Do you want to talk to that? Oh, not Mayor Clark, I think was going to second it, so moved Darren, seconded Mayor Clark. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Item 6 on the tab, Three Waters Pipeline Renewals Report. So Erin is going to speak from the...
Thank you, Chair. So this is the bi-monthly Three Waters Pipe Renewals Program dashboard that comes up to the committee. One of the key updates for this month is just around the fact that I've spoken previously around us significantly increasing the size of the program this year. Given that a number of other councils had reduced their programs, we looked to try to take up that space within the market, to get some critical work done at a competitive price, but also to make sure that we were able to keep key resources in the Three Waters industry with work within Southland so that we don't lose those resources going forward. We had delivered I think it was about $7.8 million of renewals last year. We had a go at looking at whether we could get it up to about 17 this year. And what we've found is that we simply haven't been able to get through that amount of design. We've still had a significant uplift, but we're expecting to deliver at around the $12 million mark this year. And that's that delay's largely been around getting the various different pipes designed and therefore out to market. I'm happy to take any questions from the floor.
Mayor Clark?
So, Aaron, I assume the 17 million is funded through depreciation?
That may be a question for Patricia. I expect it will be a mix of both depreciation and loan funding. Patricia, did you want to expand?
Can you repeat the question again?
Oh, sorry, is the 17 million funded through depreciation? Or do-
It's a mixture of depreciation, loan funding, and rates.
Right, so some flow-on questions from that, Chair. So what happens to the $5 million we don't spend if part of that is actually a rate increase? So if we've rated for that this year and we haven't delivered, does that go across into some sort of reserve?
We don't actually rate for the full amount of the planned delivery. There is a financing element that we take into account on the basis of delivery. So there's a delivery factor that we take into account. So this will be right at the edge of that delivery factor, this proposed forecast.
So two further questions there, Chair. I just want to go back to the answer I just got because I'm not sure I'm clear on that. So part of the funding for the $17 million, which we will only deliver $12 million, part of it is rates. So we've rated for that this year. What happens to that money that we don't spend? Does that go into a reserve somewhere? Or
Through your chair, that actually reduces the net debt account for the particular water network, whether it's water supply, wastewater or stormwater. If there has been any amounts where we haven't delivered to the extent that we had rated for, that will reduce the net debt balance in that activity.
Yeah, so can I just jump in here?
Sure.
I think you've sort of probably flagged a good point, Mayor Clark, around what's our policy, and it's probably not for this committee but for finance and policy around what is our policy around, you know, the ratios we use to fund this type of infrastructure, around how much is rated, how much is borrowed, how much is covered by depreciation, and is there consistency to that ratio, or is the sort of, we sort of, you know, it depends type thing? I think that's what you're trying to clarify, Mayor Clark, is what is the sort of funding mechanism in terms of the ratio of rates versus borrowing versus other forms?
I guess what I'm trying to signal is that in the past, it seems in the past that when we've had an under delivery on a rateable income, we tend to kick that across to a reserve somewhere. It goes into our bank accounts, for want of better words.
Yeah, that's right.
And as Patricia says, it improves our net debt situation. But if we start at zero again the following year, it's a little, for something we've already programmed from the previous year but haven't delivered, it's a little bit like a double hit to the ratepayers, isn't it?
Yeah, and look, the governance position I think that we need is that we need to be aware of what the ratio is for funding it, so
Sure.
that, you know, it's not being sort of, or it's not changing, or there's not consistency around that.
Yeah.
So Patricia, there won't be anything, is there?
There is.
There is?
In the
Okay.
financing policy, we were very clear as we went through the LTP and
Right.
our financing and revenue policy, as well as our financial strategy. We do actually say how we would fund each of those types, and how much we put in as funding for our capital programs. Our strategic projects were considered to be 100% deliveries, and then on generally, most of the others were 80%. So we were only ever expecting to fund 80% of our capital project
From rates.
from rate.
And
No, well, we use a combination. So to the extent that we're rates funding depreciation, we have that. We also have to rates fund the repayment of capital.
Yeah.
So that's what we're putting the money into the bank, using the net debt accounts, and then we use that to pay for the thing. So we use a centralised treasury policy. So we pull pieces, whether it be rates, borrowing, and then we pull that all in and then go to make the expenditure.
Yeah, and so the policy that sits within finance is 80% of rates funding.
80% on renewals, yes.
Yeah, okay. So that
Well,
clarifies your
it
point.
still didn't come to my original question.
No, it doesn't, but what it does is informs it. So I think we probably need to go with this, because I don't think you're going to get the answer you want today, is that given what's just disclosed, the 80%, how does that apply to this particular change, and Patricia, if you could bring something, back to us, that'd be good, just so we get some clarity on it.
We can add something to finance and policy in May.
Yeah, that'd be good.
And could I note, this is
So-
already addressed through the reforecasting process and the annual plan process with regard to the paper that came up to council about adjusting the capital program. This has already been adjusted through that process.
Yeah. So, so just to confirm, when we went back through the work towards the plan we put out, we factored in these changes to the capital program before we went out to public on consultation.
Yeah, just looking at it from the other end there, Chair, which is to say, if we put it in simple terms, if we decide to do $10 worth of work and there's 10 projects and we only deliver 8 and 20% of that cost has been rated, and so the money obviously goes into a reserve, when we go out the following year and commit to doing the 2 that we didn't do the previous year, are we rating for that again? So I can...
Patricia?
Through you, Chair, the answer is no.
Yeah, no.
Final question, Chair, was the issue of contingent liability. So the report mentions that some of the work will carry over the end of the financial year. So I assume if that's the way we progress, the cost will travel with the project. That's normal
right.
practice. Well, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've got Tom and then Leslie.
Actually, I suspect you're getting impatient with this particular subject, but
No, not at all.
I mean, it does seem to me that in my brief experience in council, we do always seem to deliver a lower spend than we originally rated for. Maybe there's exceptions to that, but that seems to be what I recall pretty much always happening. And then the money that's been saved, if I can call it saved, at least not expended in the previous year, then simply goes into a savings account by council. An alternative strategy would be to use that money as a contribution towards the following year's rates.
Could be, yeah.
So what we find is, if my supposition is right, that it does always tend to be underspent, it does mean, putting simply, that we're overrating. And then just putting in the bank any money that's left over. Yeah. So I think in a year like this year, where we are looking at every avenue to try to save, then, that's another option.
Yeah, absolutely. Patricia?
Through you, Chair, just to clarify that. So while we might say we were going to do $100 of capital, we only ever plan to rate and borrow. I'm going very high level and generic here, and Erin will kill me to some extent. We only tend to borrow or rate for 80 of those dollars. So if we deliver less than 80, we have some more money in the bank, which then when we go and deliver it the next year, we use that money for. We don't rate for it again. If we deliver 90, I have to go and borrow the extra 10. And that's an additional cost we hadn't planned for. So we talk about how much capital we plan to do, and that's a different number to how much I budget for us doing. So there's two aspects to that, because if I was to rate for what we planned to do, we would have a lot more money than what we would actually need.
But to answer the second part of Tom's question, so let's say we've rated for 80, we've done 70, so we've got 10 left. That 10 is then rolled into the financial assumptions when we're doing our next annual plan to say, well, we've got that, so we don't need to, so that's rolled into the financial planning for the next year, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And we said we've already got the 10 that we needed for it, so we don't need to rate for it again.
Yeah, so it drops the ask on that rate for
Yes.
that particular asset.
Except that we set the rates 3 or 4 months before we actually know how much money.
We take an estimate of how much we are going to deliver. So we have already asked the team, and we had asked them just prior to Christmas how much they do. That's why when we're in a consultation period now the time we close consultation till we come back, we actually have to go and re-look at where our actual performance is versus where we plan to be, and make adjustments again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, good clarification. And, I mean, just to add another wee bit of wood to the fire, but, you know, this year we took the, you know, there was capacity in the contracting space, so we, you know, we brought forward a lot of projects to get done, hence we've got a lot of cones around town, but we're getting a lot of work done because there was capacity, so we've almost done the reverse this year. Councillor Soper and then Alex.
Thanks, Mr Chair. As Chair of Finance, I feel compelled to spell out that there is no over-rating situation here for those on live stream to actually take on board. I don't want any implication of that left, and thank you for Patricia's explanation. I also, as Chair of Finance, want to point out, and this is also for those on live stream, that Council's finance and revenue policy and the changes we have made to that in the last several years have meant that this council has moved well away from the old style of having little pockets of reserve money scattered here and there. Our finance and reserve policy is set up quite differently now than it was many years ago, when there were people who could say, oh, but you've got some pockets of little reserves here and there. So I just want to make it clear that the explanation Patricia has given, and what we will bring back to the next Finance and Policy Committee if people wish for some more detail on this, will emphasise those points quite clearly. Finance and revenue policy does not mean that we have secret little pockets of reserves stashed away. Yeah, unfortunately we don't have. But look, I still think it's good to have robust discussion around that and to get reassurance at this level that, you know, we've got a good system and process in place, and we aren't indeed. I just don't want people on
No,
live stream to
absolutely
pick up
appreciate
that
your
there
point.
is
Yep.
any over-rating situation.
No, I don't think that was the intent of it. I
Yeah.
think it was just clarifying the mechanism of how we sort of establish the spend and the rate. Alex.
Thank you, Councillor Soper, and Patricia has have done very well at explaining what I was going to say, so I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Rhea.
Thank you, Mr Chair. On page 19 of the report, Space Street main renewal, I brought this up last time I saw this and asked for what could that contaminated soil site investigation be, and I think we were going to get an answer back, so could you?
I'm happy to speak to that. So what I've actually asked to happen is I've asked Rob to actually come back with a presentation to actually take the committee through some detail. We haven't put that on the agenda this time simply because we had a big agenda, and so I've left it until next committee meeting. But then we can go through those typical types of contamination, the questions that were asked at the last committee around the pipe types and expected life. So Rob has prepared a presentation to bring to the committee on that.
That's fantastic, thank you, Erin. Then down at the Mercer Street main water renewal, it's got a wee red there again, so, and the explanation is the design is delayed due to the consultant not familiar with ICC requirements. Has that moved somewhat forward at all, because it's still in...
As I understand it, we're still working through that with the design team.
Okay.
Okay, no further questions on that, so can I get a mover and a seconder to receive the report, and thank you to the staff that have put that together, on the Three Waters renewals, receive the report on the ICC Engineering Service Program dashboard, and note the current status of projects.
Move
Thanks.
that way.
Okay, thanks Alex, thanks Leslie, all those in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. Okay, item 7, tab 7, sorry, item 8 on the agenda, the primary infrastructure consenting program, Bluff wastewater, alternative water and Clifton wastewater consent.
Yes, and I have a couple more to be speaking to as some people are delayed on flights.
Okay.
So I'll also be speaking to this one and the other local water Dunwell
Yeah.
one.
I want to stress the last word in that, which is update.
Thank you, Chair. So we've got a couple of agenda items today that are going to feed into this one. At this stage, this is just the program dashboard as to where the consenting process is currently at with respect to Bluff wastewater, alternative water and Clifton wastewater. With regard to Bluff, we're continuing post the council resolution late last year to prepare a consent application for a 2-year short-term consent to provide us that space to allow the legislative changes that are currently underway and new standards to settle, and for us to have clear guidance as to the way forward post those changes. So the team are currently working towards that. The timeline does still remain tight for us to get that in in June. And so the team have had some discussions with Environment Southland around whether or not they are amenable to accepting that up until September, which is what they have advised at this stage. So the team are continuing to pull that together. As I understand it, the next stages are around the cultural impact assessment that's still required under the current Resource Management Act process. With regard to the Clifton process, that is really just a watching brief at the moment, again, for us to see what happens coming out of those standards. And with the alternative water supply, we've had one workshop recently around the background to that piece of work. Our intention is to conclude the current subsidence work that is happening on alternative water and to bring a further update back to council ahead of some decisions to be made on whether or not to progress with that project and the consenting program later in the year. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. So I just have one, Erin. So just with respect of, obviously this is pretty challenging because of the changing in legislation, the sort of ground moving along there. So with the application for Bluff to extend the consent, the legal advice around, getting that based on, where we're at under legislative change?
Yes, and so I think I'd expect us to probably discuss that in a little bit more detail under the second paper where we've appended the legal advice. So at the moment, this is just the progress dashboard.
Yeah.
I expect there'll probably want to be some discussion around that legal advice in the later paper under item 10.
Okay, right. No, cool, thank you. Okay, so no questions for that. So mover and seconder to receive the report, and thank you for the update. It's really important. Notes the project working group continues in the preparation of the status quo application, and notes the legal advice recommendation duration for the Bluff wastewater application extended to 5 years.
Can I just make a comment, please, Chair? I just want to note that I'm concerned about the extension to 5 years. So I just want that noted, please.
Okay, thank you. We can note that. Can I have a mover and seconder, Barry and Trish?
Can we, is there room for mover seconder? Is there room for all the discussion around that 5 years?
Can I ask if we can have that as part of the second paper at the moment?
Well,
all we're noting
I was
is
going to
the
make
advice.
the point that we're actually, we're only being asked
We're
to
only
note
noting.
it.
We're
in
noting,
here.
yeah, we're just noting.
Okay,
Noting the
that's fine.
update.
So,
yeah.
so we'll come to consider it when we get
Yes.
to the later paper.
Yes, yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you. Okay, I've got a mover and second. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Okay, speed limit review. Is this you, Doug? Oh, Doug's popped out. So, okay, what's pretty simple paper in the sense of, I'll take it as read and seek comment, and if Doug pops back in, we'll get him to add anything he wants to the paper. Mayor
Prepared
Clark.
to move the 3 recommendations,
Well, just
Chair.
got a couple of comments here first. Thanks though, Darren. Mayor Clark,
So just seeking some clarification that
can you speak into your mic, please?
on page 30 of board books, where it refers to Otatara Road, does that include a portion of Bay Road as well, or is it just Otatara Road?
Just Otatara.
Just Otatara Road, yep.
But we are happy to take any feedback if there are other areas that elected members have received feedback on that they would like us to include as well.
Sure. Well, I've got something, I get a lot of feedback in Otatara about Otatara Road and Curran Road. And it's interesting, think if, Doug, if somebody was to measure the length of Curran Road and give us some time frame about how long it takes to get down Curran Road, which is quite a short road, I might add, at 60 as opposed to 80, it would only run into a fraction of 1 minute. So I guess there's some degree of scepticism within the community. I think that there are some people that just can't do a speed limit reduction, regardless of what the rationale for it all is. But I do get quite a bit of feedback about it.
I think one of the key pieces that we look at, and Doug will be able to talk to this a bit more than I can, is that one of the criteria that the NZTA look at when you're adjusting a speed limit and whether or not you've got that speed limit right is the average travelling speed of the traffic that are using the road. One of the things that we've found is that often there's a bedding in period and then people get used to that new speed. Some of these roads we've found that hasn't happened and that people haven't adjusted their speeds, and that can be an indicator that we may have gotten the speed environment wrong. I have found that I think it was probably a little bit of an indication to me one day when I was travelling along Curran Road at 60 and I was passed by a mum on the school run with their kids in car seats, that I went, oh, okay, maybe we've got the speed environment wrong on this one and that people are getting particularly impatient. So that was just the reason that we've put it forward for review.
I guess the other thing about the Otatara Road one is that we've got a speed camera up there, a fixed one. And I guess if the argument was that the limit was too low and people were doing a little bit more speed, we'd have more tickets, I guess. And so I don't know what the volume has been.
That's on Otatara Road.
On Otatara Road,
yeah.
Yep.
Tom?
We don't have speed cameras anywhere.
No, yeah.
NZTA does.
Yeah. Tom?
Erin partly made the point I was going to make. Curran Road has become dangerous by reducing the speed limit because I drive it regularly because I definitely don't want to get caught speeding. I drive it at 60, people fly past you. It's made it a more dangerous road. Very few people, other than councillors I suspect, very few people actually drive at 60. I mean, to me, that kind of road definitely should be reviewed. One I would add to that list, and if you're taking a list, Erin, is the road between the bridge and the beach, where there's similar sort of things happening. And I don't mean Holodun's Road, I mean from
post the bridge.
Already bridge to the beach.
So just a point of clarification, welcome Doug to the table. So the Otatara Road, Duns Road, 280 Ks, so if that's from the start of Otatara, so by the bottle store there, out through on the way.
No.
Still, Otatara Road is the road that's...
No, I know where Otatara.
So it's Otatara Road between Duns Road.
Oh, yeah, right, between,
Yeah, the first kilometre or so is 60.
So the speed limit along Duns Road, where the building, it's 60, yeah, because the school's in it, yeah, okay. Cool, thank you. Doug, anything you want to add now you're at the table?
Through you, Chair. No, the roads we've identified, it's in response to feedback. We have only a certain amount of tools to reduce the travel speed enforcement, which we're never going to have in that area. Behavioural adjustment, which is something to think about, but also physical changes. So we reduce the ability of people to make silly decisions physically. And again, because we're talking about long stretches of rural road, that would only be achieved by narrowing and putting threshold treatments and this sort of thing, which is totally against the nature of the road and the land use. So we are limited in that regard. People will travel fast if they're able to do so. And without the hand of enforcement, there's little we can do with that regard. Most people adhere to speed signs generally. So what we're trying to do is make it fit for purpose. So the roads we've identified are ones that we have known about since the original speed plan was done 18 months ago. And we want to review it. We want to have a good look at it. We want to talk to the public, and we want to take any information we can just to ensure it. What we will be doing is doing some speed surveys as part of this review. We need to establish exactly how fast people are actually going, and so we'll do those with double tube counters. And it'll also give us an idea of the type of traffic and the mode splits that we have. So there's quite a bit of work to be done to review this completely, but I think it's a worthwhile workflow.
Okay, thank you. So no final comments? Okay, so we've got three points here: to receive the report and then a recommendation for council that a certified speed management plan is reviewed and the findings be brought back to council, and that staff consult the public as part of that review. So have I got a mover and a seconder for that? Darren, yeah, Darren moved, Steve second. No further discussion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Thank you.
Okay, tab 9 on board books and item 10 on the agenda, total mobility funding. Doug, you're having a big day out today.
Always a pleasure, Mr. Chairman. This is a bit of a difficult one, and it's a difficult one because of the type of people that it affects. Funding for total mobility doesn't cover the need of those that use it. We have had, you'll see in the report, we've had some top-up funding. We're lucky to get that over the last couple of years. That ends at the end of this financial year. And we've done an analysis of what the damage is going to be if we don't get additional funding and top-up funding, if the trends that we've experienced in growth keep going the same. So there's a couple of things in there. One is it currently is 75% subsidised, with the government's top-up 25. We'd like to see it go back to 50. There's a process for us to follow to do that. But it is also amongst the industry, amongst local authorities, something that a number of other local authorities, particularly the larger ones, are going through as a decision. We'd all essentially like to see a 50% subsidy as opposed to a 75. The growth is uncontrollable, and because the rules we work within is that we can't essentially limit the use of the scheme in any simple way. I guess I'll put it that way. We did look at assessments, whether the assessments were robust enough, and they are. They're independent of council. We don't do them. So really we just need it to be sustainable for council and sustainable for the users as well, without doing damage to either party.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. Appreciate your sentiments there. Darren?
Thanks, Chair. So with that in mind, I'm prepared to move
You're
1,
keen, getting done,
3 and 4. So it's not a bottomless pit. We can't have it going over budget and spilling over onto the ratepayer. It is a wider issue for the government to address. It's their scheme, essentially. It would be fair to say it's not quite fit for purpose, and by that, because of the demand and the processes that we have to place limits. So
just go through that again. So you're prepared to move
1, 3 and 4.
1, 3 and 4. Yeah.
Receive the report.
So receive the report and then request staff to develop an
Yep.
implemented process to limit
But at the
numbers.
same time, I think, does it need to be or? Because I think it can be an and that we advocate to the government for a reduction in subsidy.
Yes, we can absolutely make that
Through
amendment.
you,
Yeah.
Chair. Absolutely.
Is there any discussion before we accept that? So Leslie, Tom and Mayor Clark.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I'd just like Doug to comment on whether we actually have the ability, considering it's a nationwide scheme, to limit the number of trips undertaken by individuals. It is a nationwide scheme with nationwide rules.
Through you, Chair, we have the ability to set our own rules. We've gone back and forth with NZTA a number of times, identifying what can you do to help us. And we also inquired whether or not they would be readjusting their rules for use. The answer was no. It's not in their consideration. They are working on a paper at the moment, but that's some way away. So they're aware of the cost problems with total mobility, and they're aware of the funding challenges that local authorities have. So they are aware, but action's some way away.
I would just
So-
add to that I note that we're obviously not the only ones experiencing this. I think Environment Canterbury had a similar paper go up late last year, experiencing similar demand issues.
So that was my next point. I'm well aware that that we are not the only council dealing with this. What I'm worried about is that we become part of a tsunami of councils that are doing the work that we actually should expect central government to do on a scheme that is a nationwide central government funded scheme. I'm just a little bit concerned of being one of a number of councils that fall into the almost trap of taking preemptive action that somewhat, more than somewhat, disadvantages the disabled people in our community, and that lets central government off the hook.
So would you change or ask the mover to change that to advocates for central government and coordinates with local government, other local authorities?
I'd certainly like us to advocate to central government in conjunction with LGNZ and other councils.
So do you think that'll capture what you're trying to?
I'm not sure that we only want to be advocating for a reduction in the subsidy. I think it's more advocating for the longevity of this scheme as a scheme of entitlement for disabled people. So it goes a bit wider than just limiting it to the level of subsidy. Do you see what I'm trying to say here, Doug?
Through you, Chair. Yes, I understand completely. There is a group of local authorities, people like me, I suppose. We did meet a couple of months ago, and without exception, every single person there is experiencing these problems. Every council. It's particularly poor in major metropolitan areas, where it's the expenditure is eye-watering, that what we're going through unfunded. So I agree, we could do both. I mean, we need to advocate for these folk, but we also need to, I think, take care in how wide the scheme goes.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Doug.
Tom?
Well, I think there's two distinct issues, aren't there? One is that government, again, as we've seen a few times in the last couple of years, has stepped back from funding support for things and just said, you know, council, you can do what you like, basically. And we either step into the breach and increase rates, or we don't and disadvantage people that we would very much like to help. So anyway, we're put in that position, but I don't think we can ignore the fact that, you know, the second issue, which is that the usage is nearly doubled in a couple of years, which is extraordinary. So either we've got, twice as many disabled people, which clearly we don't, or they're using the service twice as much, which is a more likely scenario, and we don't know why that is, Doug, except that it may be such an attractive price, in other words, free, that it just encourages people to, I mean, we should encourage people to get out and about. Can I ask though, do we actually have a method by which we can limit the number of journeys? Suppose we arbitrarily said it's no more than 2 a week. Do we have any way of knowing how often somebody's travelled?
Through you, Chair. Unfortunately, we don't. The new system that was put in place used to be a paper-based system. Now it's a card, but the card is an ID card rather than a smart card, so we're not recording individual trips to individual users. The system doesn't allow that. There is a new system coming in place that will allow that. So to get the data we need in terms of how many trips an individual would make at any one time, we would need the operators, and we need the operators to do that. And one factor with the operators at the moment we're also working on is two of them are offering essentially no fare, and they're just taking the subsidy. And again, which they're entitled to do. So we also are looking at the contracts we have with our operators. One of the things we could look at is requiring them to charge some, the 25% portion of the fare.
And just in response to Councillor Campbell's other question about what's driven the demand, that correlates with the switch from 50% subsidy per trip to government adding the additional 25% subsidy. So that's obviously appears to have tipped over a pricing point that has made it much more attractive.
So can I ask a second question? Are we certain that we cannot change to the 50% on our own?
Through you, Chair, we can. We have to give 3 months' notice of withdrawing from that 25% subsidy scheme. So we can do that arbitrarily, not accept the subsidy, but we have to give notice to NZTA to do so. So there's a process for us to go through there as well.
Well, why don't we do that? I mean, the idea of lobbying government, central government, to change the subsidy to 50%, I don't see this being in their top 1,000 priorities. So, you know, seems unlikely to happen. I mean, if we have the authority to do it ourselves, why would we not do it ourselves? It seems like the right people then would pay 25% of the fare.
Yeah, so we could include that in as D in recommendation 4, subject to the movers' approval, that we, the council or the infrastructure committee recommends to council that the subsidies change to a 50% subsidy.
It would really fit under 3A. It could be one of the processes developed as a suggestion.
Yeah, you may get different outcomes though. If, you know, the feedback is in here and said that, you know, the change from 50 to 75 led to the significant increase. By limiting the number of trips, you know, you've probably created more needs, so you still might not get to a position where you would with a 50% subsidy, would be the only sort of thing that I think you don't capture in A. I mean, I'd be supportive of a change that recommended that.
I mean, the processes have to come back for approval anyway.
Okay. So on that note, when would it come back to? It would come back to this committee. The process. So when would that come back, Doug? Well, are we a month? Or?
Through you, Chair, yeah, we can have it back the next week.
Okay. So then that. So Tom, just to your point, that within a month we could potentially have a recommendation to this committee that we drop to 50% subsidy.
Sorry, can I just note that as part of any changes we would need to run a consultation process, so that would be a lengthier process. Rhiannon isn't here. Ahead of us making, you know, we could come back within a month to provide our proposal. But then the final decisions would be post-consultation.
Yep. That cover you? Okay, so we've captured that in our notes. Thank you. So we've got Mayor Clark and then Councillor Soap again.
Sure, through you, Chair, just basically reinforcing what Tom and Leslie have said. I think the way forward is to, as Darren suggested in 3A, to try and limit the number of trips. If we don't, then given that some operators provide it free to the client, why wouldn't you do your groceries one day, go and see the doctor another day, and just spend the other 3 or 4 days in town doing whatever you want to do? Now that's an ideal world, but it comes at a huge cost.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, the forecast increase in the report are about 1% on rates, just for the overspend. Just doesn't include the normal operating costs. And as Leslie said, it's all very well for government to back away and expect us just to continue to fund and then to add a surplus on top of that.
Yeah, thank you. Leslie?
Thanks, Mr Chair. I just wonder whether it's worth adding to 3A and or consider reducing subsidy level to 50%.
So it would be and, wouldn't it? And consider reducing subsidy to 50%.
Well, I'm saying and or, if you're going to come back with a recommendation on the reduction of the subsidy level, it might be that you then didn't come back with a recommendation on limiting the number of trips.
Yeah, or and or.
So
yeah,
it
I see what you
provides
mean.
for
Yeah,
the
sorry.
and or consideration.
No, good point. Darren, are you happy for that amendment?
Yes.
So can you make that change? Do we have someone else? Trish, sorry.
Before you vote on that, are we able to ascertain how many trips? It seems that we can't with the cards that are currently being used.
Trips per individual, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, no, we can't. Doug said that.
As a whole number
Can't
of trips
currently,
we
but
can.
we will have technology coming forward that will be able to enable that. When will that be in, Doug?
Through you, Chair, we have no timeline at this stage. We're just working through procurement with NZTA.
Yeah.
So it's a nationwide system.
So if we're looking to limit the number, that's not possible if we don't have the technology that sits beside it.
No, it wouldn't be currently, no, that's right.
Sorry, just to clarify, what Doug had advised is that we would have to work with the individual operators to limit it versus your card not working.
Thank you.
Yeah, but there is a technology solution coming that would enable that detection of usage, wouldn't it? Is that what you said?
Through you, Chair, that's correct.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so we've got a mover. You right with that? Got a seconder for that? Don't rush to put your hands up, people. We need a seconder. Oh, seconder. Okay, thank you. So, do you just want to flip down so I can read through that, please? Okay, so we've got receive the mobility report, and thank you for that, Doug. And then we've got mover and seconder for option 3, develop and implement the process, including the 50% and/or, develop the communication strategy and develop the policy for exceptional circumstances to address high needs, and then advocate to central government for the reduction. So all those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Thank you.
Okay, Doug, you get to step down. So tab 10 and item 11 is local water done well update.
And that one's with me again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As the committee will be aware, we had been waiting in anticipation of the new wastewater environmental performance standards, which we had been advised would be due out early this year. Those came out last weeks of February, and the team have gotten underway with reviewing those standards and what they mean, both for our process for Bluff wastewater, but also longer term for our process for Clifton as well. One of the things that we've found is that the standards perhaps don't offer us the benefits that we were hoping to get from them. Central government had spoken about the new standards being likely to provide a cheaper cost option for councils, and they definitely appear to do that for the bigger treatment plants. What we are seeing is that there is likely to be some increased cost, particularly for those smaller treatment plants. The legal advice is attached at the moment. One of their concerns that they've raised is simply around the timing for those standards to settle, for the first cases to be heard under that, and really their recommendation is that we would look to, they would recommend to us, rather than looking for a short 2-year consent, interim consent for Bluff, that we look to a 5-year one. We've discussed that internally, and our concerns with the 5-year extension is that then we will be very much in the period where we are trying to deliver Clifton also, and that our ability to deliver 2 major treatment plant upgrades, both from a resourcing and a finance capacity, would be difficult. The other issue that we have is that, and I think this is in the drafting of the legislation, and I do expect it to be clarified, is that at the moment they have not really provided a transition period, and what we would expect to be amended in the legislation is that once that 2-year period was up, we wouldn't have to have physically constructed whatever the new change would be, that there would be a transition period for us simply to have gotten a consent lodged within that 2-year period, and then to have a pathway to construct those upgrades post the 2 years. I have had discussions both with DIA and Tamata Arawai. Tamata Arawai have advised that that was their intention, and they're surprised that that perhaps hasn't come through in the legislation as drafted. So we are working underway with a submission which will come back to this committee to go back around those standards. So that's one piece of work, but I did want to bring that initial interim advice at this stage because I know people are interested. The other piece that we've found is because of the standards not perhaps being as we expected, the legal advice was that we should also go back and provide a late submission to the Water Services Bill. That had already closed prior to the standards coming out, and so we have already done that as well, and that's attached for information of the committee also, and happy to take any questions.
Okay, so yeah, noting this is an update, and thank you, Erin, for your your work on this one. So I'll take questions related to the paper in terms of the update and clarification, please. Alex?
Thank you. So I have been watching this, as you know, for quite some time, and had the opportunity to get some advice from Taumata Arawai around it. They had said that the wastewater standards that are currently being consulting on propose that the wastewater treatment plants may only operate on section 124 for a maximum of 2 years. However, it was also proposed that that will take effect 5 years after wastewater standards are made. So in terms of timeframes for new consents, or if we need to upgrade our plants, extend our pipes, etc., it's proposed that there's effectively a 7-year timeframe to get through that backlog. So are you saying that, and obviously it was written in our report, that that reflection of what the advice that we're being given is not coming through in what's been drafted into legislation?
That's right. So that's my view. It's also the view of the legal team that have reviewed it for us. I've also spoken to Tamata Arawai and had that advice that there is more to come around the transition periods, but they weren't able to give any certainty as to exactly what instrument that would be coming through in.
So under that proviso, although we're getting advice from Taumata Arawai that is the intention, we have to operate to the law in the current legislation as it is drafted.
And we don't have anything that is law at the moment. Currently, they are all proposed standards and proposed legislation.
Yeah, cool, thank you.
Yeah, I think that just highlights how tricky this is, in terms of we're trying to sort of almost guess where we're going to land. We get some advice that says you're probably going to land here, and no, you're down the road and on the next street. So anyway, got Leslie, then Tom.
Me?
Leslie first, sorry,
Leslie.
Tom. Yep.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's not so much a question as a comment. The first one is that the presumption against retrospective application is such a fundamental part of law that I almost just can't believe a bill got to the stage with any doubt, but I just urge that we definitely make comment on that, because it's just such a fundamental principle. The second one that I find quite worrying is that the definitions are so poor that we're not sure whether we fit low energy, coastal or open ocean.
Yeah.
I mean, it just beggars belief really again that there's a bill that got to this point and us and others are not sure which definition we fit, considering the implications of it, including that we could look again at a longer pipeline, which I seem to remember we thought about looking at an earlier stage. So my comment rather than question is just that I think it is fundamentally necessary for us to do everything we can to get this bill to an actual point of being reasonable and workable. Not just for ourselves, but for a lot of other councils who are facing the same issues.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Tom.
I would just note that we've also shared our legal advice with a number of our counterparts to try to raise awareness of the issues as well.
Yeah, I'm very pleased to hear that, because it's the retrospective one is just so fundamentally terrible that it's got to the stage where we even have to be considering that.
Yeah. Okay, Tom.
So I would just like to understand a little bit better the benefit that going for 5 years would provide. As I understand it, and I must admit I don't understand it very well, having read it, but as I understand it, we simply don't know at this point how the rules are likely to be applied to Bluff. So therefore we've got a situation where a plant, the operating licence will run out end of this year, all right? And we would dearly like to be able to comply. We don't want to be running without a licence, so we want to comply, but we don't quite know what compliance means. So for that reason, and it's the same reason that a few months ago we said, well, let's go for a 2-year licence, because 2 years will be long enough to know what exactly what we've got to achieve. But the legal advice, as I read it, Erin, and this is where the question comes, is that even over 2 years, and particularly given that the way the rules are written at the moment, the new plant would have to be up and running in 2 years. And we just don't have time to do that, right? So that given that we just don't know what the rules are going to be, and even if we did, it looks as if we're going to have to do some extra stuff, and there's not enough time actually to do that, even within the 2-year time frame. So that's where the 5 years comes, and I suppose you could just as easily argue 3, 4 or 5, but that's why it's longer than 2, right? Is that right?
That's exactly right.
Right. So the question for us now is then, we are presumably preparing a submission, not submission, we're preparing an application and hope to, I think, get it in pretty soon actually, didn't we? For a 2-year, a new, it wasn't an extension, it was a new 2-year.
New 2-year, short term.
Right, new 2-year licence. The advice we're getting is that we should make that 5. Is that a matter of typing a 5 instead of a 2 in the line? Or would it be a different, would the application have to substantially change as a consequence of 2 becoming 5?
No, there'll be some minor changes, but not substantially. It would not substantially need to change. My main concern with the change, and this is what we've discussed internally, is that whilst on the face of it, from a legal perspective, they're absolutely right. Push it out, buy yourselves some time, see where the standards settle, see what the first cases that go through. You don't want to be first cab off the rank under the new standards, ideally, is what the legal team are recommending would be the best scenario. The difficulty for us is that that means that our consent would then expire in 2030, which means that we've also got Clifton expiring in 2029, which means we would have the 2 of them then at the same time. I think it's highly unlikely that Clifton would receive an extension, and our ability to undertake those 2 projects at the same time, as well as the funding implications of doing that, would be significant. So what I have gone back to the lawyers to have a discussion about is, if we simply keep moving now, just go through that optioneering process essentially while the standards are settling, and get ready to lodge as soon as we can, we would be relying on the likelihood that they will, to Councillor Crackett's point, put in place a reasonable transition provision that would allow us time to construct outside of the 2-year period, but before the timeline where we would have to start construction on Clifton.
So you're saying then that your personal recommendation, leaving aside the lawyer, your personal recommendation would be keep going with the 2?
I think that if we wanted to be safe, we could take it out to 3. Would be one option, and that's just what we're working through. We didn't want to put it on council to make that decision, or the committee to make that decision today. We're just going away to do some further work on it, but I certainly wouldn't want to push it out to 5, because as much as that would be a nice timing to give us more time for Bluff, that would just give us really difficult damage for the Clifton consent.
And presumably, sorry, keep going, Grant, presumably if it turns out that when it's clearer what we need to do, if actually it's quite clear what we need to do, then we'd be able to move within that 3-year time frame so that as at the click of the clock in the 3rd year, we'd be ready to
And the other piece that we haven't settled yet, and I've got another meeting, I've had a brief discussion with both DIA and Te Mara Arawai, and I've got another discussion with them, with Te Mara Arawai next week, is, for them, they were expecting that this would be a simpler pathway, a more cost-efficient process for councils. They are surprised to hear that that is not the case for the Bluff consent, so they are interested because they weren't intending to make it more difficult for smaller plants. So we do want to very much make them familiar with our situation and perhaps the unintended consequences. They have dealt with those smaller plants of under 1,000 population. We're unfortunately sitting just above that in those plants under 2,000 population. And so I think that we're unfortunately sitting in just that little bit of a difficult place where they've made rules that are one size fits all, and we're sitting with a very small plant, very much at the bottom, having to deal with those one size fits all approach.
Okay, so you're not actually asking us to approve
No,
anything?
it's just for
it's just an
information
update.
today.
Yeah. So just on that last point, Erin, so that would be, we would put that into our submission, that the fact that, you know, we see there's a gap that
Oh,
some of us.
absolutely.
Yeah.
We'll put that into the submission, but we've also been asked not to wait for the submission, to also be reflecting that back to them now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah, thank you. Rangi?
Thanks, Chair. Look, after reading the information in front of us in this item, it would seem that the Invercargill City Council, along with a few other councils, are what I'd say are up Wastewater Creek without a paddle. However, this council didn't have to be in this dilemma.
Rangi, this is an update.
This
David.
is a comment, okay?
Okay,
Are you
no.
allowed, Leslie, a comment?
So what I want you to do is make sure you stay within the bounds of this conversation,
Yes,
which is
there is.
around, if you've got
And-
specific comments about
There is a question?
the paper,
Yes.
we're not talking about the positions that's already made, right?
Oh, no, I'm not.
Okay, so you stay within those boundaries, that'd be great, thank you.
Well, as I'm saying, this is a comment. We did not have to be in this dilemma because of the decision we made last December. Okay, and I'd like to quote the Local Government Act, which I think is an important document. And do we run by the Local Government Act? I think we do. Okay, the Local Government Act states regarding prudent decisions that the local authority should ensure prudent stewardship and efficient and effective use of its resources in the interests of its district or region, including by planning effectively for the future management of its assets. Now, one thing I've learnt in my time of local government is you do not believe anything from central government until it is in legislation, black and white. A few years ago, I sat in a large auditorium at an LGNZ conference and listened to Prime Minister Ardern stand in front of me and say all councils will be able to choose whether to opt in or opt out of 3 waters. Well, we know what happened with that. We were all forced into it. Now,
Have you got a comment coming on the paper?
yes,
Good.
yes. So what I'm saying is that this council has made its bed on December the 17th last year, and it must lie in it. It had the opportunity to make a prudent decision.
Okay,
It
so-
chose not to. Now let me finish here, because I'm
Well,
speaking.
but your comments aren't anything related to
They
this
are
paper.
related to this, because it clearly states.
It's not related to this paper, so
The
unless you can
paper-
get back on track, you're
The
gonna...
paper clearly states that what is happening is not what we thought was going to happen.
Okay,
Okay, so I am commenting on that very fact.
thank you.
Can you please let me speak? I don't know why, you trying to shut down democracy, or what are you trying to do?
I'm just trying to keep everyone on track.
Well,
And not
I heard
relitigate
I heard
decisions.
a soliloquy from
Keep
Councillor
going.
Campbell here.
Keep going.
Okay, right. So what I'm saying is that we have made our decision to go down this path, okay, and this miracle pathway that is going to deliver standards that meet the status quo. Obviously, this low, what's it called, low energy coastal fields, the engineers have decided we are in that group. So we're going to have to work with that, and the nitrate levels are going to have to correspond. So we've decided that, and my question is to Erin, is that do we still have a chance to go back to option 1?
I don't think that's related to this paper,
It's
so
a question
I
to
don't-
Erin.
I don't think Erin has to answer that question. What I will point to, though, in
Well,
point-
excuse me, why will you
because
not
it's
let
not
the gentleman-
related to this paper.
It is related to this paper,
It's
because
not. So-
if there is a solution that provides an out, that puts us in budget, remember that option 1 came in on budget for LTP.
So what you'd expect, this is an update paper, so what you'd expect, but staff would give consideration to the decision that's already been made by council, reflect on the fact that we've got legal advice around where the legislation, which is changing significantly, is at, and how we navigate through that process, just like the discussion we've just had around whether we go for an extension for 2 years or 3 years or 5 years.
So I am
right?
asking a similar question to Councillor Campbell. 2 years or 5 years, I'm asking, is option one still on the table now that we know that things have not worked out as we have thought?
Well,
So why won't you allow the question?
okay, I'll answer the question.
No, I've asked our General Manager, Erin.
Well, answer the question. The question is, it will be given consideration by the staff as part of this is where we're at with the legislation now.
Excuse me, Chair, can you give me an answer why you will not let Erin
So
answer that question?
then I'll go to Erin to ask her what she thinks of my response, okay? So my view would be that the staff will go, they will review where we sit at present with the decision that's been made by council, okay? Gives consideration to the legal advice we've just reflected on now, gives consideration to, we're at the second reading, I think, of the legislation, but we're to go through the third reading. Okay, so where we're at in the legislative process brings back to this committee the recommendations to staff, which would include, okay, well, we made the decision here, but given the consideration of this changed environment, this is our recommendation, and considered part of that would be, is option one, as you've highlighted, back on the table. Erin, is that the process that the staff would follow?
Yeah, so we can bring that advice back to the next meeting.
Yeah, thank you.
Because the reason I raised it is that if we proceed down the road of option two, the information I have is going to be double what option one was.
Okay.
So that shows, yeah, it shows our decision-making process.
Yeah, but I appreciate the point you've made around what our role is as councillors, is to give good
Prudent decisions.
Absolutely, and I'm confident we've got a process in place that we are enabling us to make those decisions prudently. So, thank you for making that point.
No, but sorry, I still didn't get the answer from Erin. Is option one still on the table in our time frame now?
So I think, well, Erin, you can say what you said.
So it was a question that I asked the team because it was a question I expected to get asked. What I've been advised is that we have now moved too far past the consenting process to be able to do that prior to the expiration of the consent at the end of the year. One of the potentials would have been that could have been one of the options that we looked at. If we put in place a 2-year interim consent, then all options go back on the table and we start looking at that process again. As the legislation currently stands, there may have been potential for that, but when I've spoken to Tamara Arawai, they have been clear that their intention is that if you will have to meet those new standards, there will not be an alternative pathway. That the previous option that had been explored around the wetland does not comply with the new standards. So should those new standards come into effect as they are, that would not be an option for council to pursue going forward.
Okay, so just to finish off, back in December 17th, option one gave us a chance to meet budget, and now that is off the table, and now we have to proceed with options that we have no idea what the costs are going to be. Thank you.
Well, because we have no idea of the framework of the legislation we're working towards. So, thank you. Mayor Clark.
Yeah, so a couple of things, Erin. If we were to seek a 5-year extension, is there anything that stops us at year 3 presenting for a new consent at that stage? Are we bound to sit tight for 5 years?
Absolutely not. We could
No.
go earlier than that.
Yep.
I think the only concern that I would have would be our tendency not to keep ourselves very focused and accelerated on the need to get that project done so that it doesn't fall into the same timeline as the Clifton plant.
Yep. So why I asked that is you said that one of the reasons for the 5-year being of concern is it sort of dovetailed with Clifton.
Yes.
But one of the benefits of the 5-year is it does leave us time to consider what's not in the report, which is what's going to happen with the new RMA, or RMAs plural, because a lot of the issues raised by Jeanette are taking us back to what sections within the current RMA will be doing to us if we go down that path, and we've decided to go down that path as opposed to go to fast track. So it would seem to us that we might well progress down that track only to find that the government changes the RMA. And that might bring concern for us, but it might bring benefit as well. We just don't know. So Minister Bishop was here earlier this week and he signalled that they are moving fairly quickly on those 2 RMA replacement acts, but could get no commitment about when they would actually impact and whether they would be retrospective on any consents. Okay.
Yeah, and I'd note that Jeanette Campbell, who's provided that legal advice, is chairing that RMA work.
Yeah,
So she's, obviously has to keep those pieces quite separate. She can't tell us what's happening,
No.
but she is obviously well informed around what's likely to come in that space.
Yep. Thank you.
Righto, no further comments, so mover and seconder pleased to receive the report, and thanks Erin for your, significant effort on this and for your work. Tom's moved, Leslie second, all those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Okay, tab 11 major laid item, which is item 12 on the agenda around temporary road closure for the Arts Marahuku Nota 25 Night of the Arts. Oh, thanks very
Move
much.
the recommendations, Chair.
I'll second that.
Okay, Ria,
Would
I'll
like
take
to
a question first before I accept the mover and seconder.
Sorry, Mr Chair. I have a question about this application, and the question is, this is a repeat event that the Night of the Arts are actually holding, and my question is, the council's policy for temporary road closures, does the council policy stipulate that whether you're a small, medium or large organiser, does it stipulate that they must notify public via only the Southland Times? The reason why I'm asking this is that we know that our community groups are hurting out there, and it's been brought to my attention that this group's having to go through a process of notifying the public through only the Southland Times, incurring quite a large fee to do that. And we're asking for businesses to come to the city centre to activate events, and yet it's a bit of a carrot and a stick. So what I was wondering is that inside of our policy, do we need to review the policy so that with modern times, groups, small, medium or large, can actually notify the public with different platforms, like social media, like our council website? Just trying to think of ways that we could make this better for our community.
Yeah. Doug, do you want to pick that one up?
Thank you. Yeah, through you, Chair. The method in which we notify the public is the one that's the most wide-reaching, and that's what we've considered at the moment. I don't see any issue with using all manner of platforms to notify people.
Yeah, Michael, do you want to talk to that?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Chair, through you. It's because, Councillor, this piece of work that you're passing as a resolution comes through from the 1974 Local Government Act. It's one of the remnant parts.
Yep.
So in 1974, newspapers were the only way of communicating.
Yeah.
It hasn't been modernised since.
Okay, but are we able to, as a council, look at how our policy?
It's not a policy thing we can change.
So I know that it fits under the Local Government Act.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is that there's no way that we can offer alternative platforms for?
It's either they or... No, so other
From this side.
platforms are absolutely available.
Yeah. But
It's
the formal notification has to be done.
But where formal notification is required, it is required through the local, the major daily circulating in the area, which for us is the Southland Times. You will note that the Southland District Council often will use the Express for a number of their advertisements. It's a matter of interpreting, sorry, that's terrible English, interpreting
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying.
the legislation. Those options are available, and we try and do work with our community where we can. We ourselves have to advertise through the Southland Times.
All good? You happy with that, Rick? Mayor Clark?
Yeah, just want to reinforce what Ria was saying. If we truly want to get the message out, and no disrespect to the Southland Times, but their circulation list is very, very low in comparison to the Express, which gets to every single letterbox in town. Well, gets to most anyway, and it's free. But platforms are clearly the way to go. Our platform, What's on Inver's, got a viewer look of about 40 or 50,000. I mean, we don't have to like these people. It's just a matter of how do we get the message out. And I think it's a little bit archaic to be going through a paper that's got a dwindling dwindling circulation list, I think. It doesn't give people, and it comes at a cost.
So,
So, for
well, the
example,
only
if I
option
wanted to place something in the Southland Times, I think the cost would be significantly more than if I wanted to go and place it on a website.
Yes.
so is it something we could be non-compliant for certain events on? So if we determined that it was,
It comes down to the level, Mr Chair, through you, of the risk that you're willing to take in the event that if you don't comply with the
Yeah, yeah.
legislation, if something was to happen,
yeah, then
the
you're up for it.
consequence and the risk back
Yeah.
there that you haven't followed proper
Yeah.
process, that is a conversation for this council always to undertake.
Yeah, absolutely.
Through you, Chair, it is a question for Michael. We're obligated to use the Southland Times. But
We use the Southland Times
Yep.
because that is the major daily circulating in our district. For many things, I know that we do use the Southland Express as well. We use as many channels as possible. When I will look at Lisa and she's nodding, as possible to get our messages out. But for statutory compliance, it is the Southland Times for us.
okay, my question was going to be, is it only exclusive use of the Southland Times? But obviously it's not, so that's...
Through you, Chair, I think the issue that Ria raised wasn't how we get the circulation out, it's the cost.
Yeah.
So it's no good saying, well, look, you know, we still have to use the Southland Times, but we can use all the others if we elect to. The cost still comes with the Southland Times.
Yeah, it does.
And for small organisations trying to show some initiative and get into these street events, that comes at a cost. It's a little bit like the closing off of the street costs somewhere between $2,000 and $4,500 for traffic management. We just need to get on top of those costs.
Sure.
Yeah,
It's significant, and it doesn't need to be that high.
No. Well, if you could advocate through to central government about getting that local government act changed, that'd be fantastic.
I mean, the advice we got from Michael was that expectation was from 50 years ago.
Yeah, I know.
And
Most of us
is
weren't
it
born then.
specific in the Act that we have to use the Southland Times, or does it just say a newspaper?
It's just a major daily circulating in your district or territory. So for us, that is still the Southland Times.
Okay, thank you.
Ringy?
Well, I can do that.
Look, my comment was, question was just on road closures, temporary road closures. Following up, you talked about Currans Road and Nototara Road in previous topics. Now, I'm interested in those roads personally because they get me out to Sandy Point. Now, I know there's been work, but I've tried to find out when they reopen and when they shut. Now, I've just Google our website and type in road closures in a space that's a search engine, and it gives me stuff from 2018. There is no road closure information on our website. Should there be road closure information on the council website?
Yeah, could you follow that up, Doug, and make sure it's up to date?
I mean, I'm just asking the question.
There is, but
Sorry,
Well, I mean, what do you have to do to find it?
Doug?
Is there a password or something, or what do you have to do?
Through you, Chair, I will follow that up. It should be...
I typed it in and it was 2017, Curran Road will be closed, so that was
What I
useful.
would note, though, is anybody can sign on to Council's Antenno app and receive alerts around road closures in your area.
Okay, but I'm just like, I'm a bit of a Neanderthal when it comes to apps, so, so I just want to...
Stone tablets?
Yeah. I mean, the website, wouldn't it be quite easy to go to a website and see?
Yeah, the antenna app's a good
Chair,
mechanism.
I think Lisa's happy to make a comment.
Yeah.
Kia ora, councillors. Through you, Chair, we are currently upgrading our website, and that will be a new feature that is coming through on the new site. It is not currently on there. We do not have that functionality at the moment.
But it is coming, road closures, or
Yes.
road openings.
But also, Lisa, for the Neanderthals in the room, could you send round an email to councillors with how they log into antenna?
Yes, absolutely.
Leslie?
Thank you, Mr Chair. Just going backwards a bit, welcome to the world of the 1956 Health Act, an even older act than the one we are discussing. There are also a lot of other pieces of legislation, even older, that this council has to comply with. We are basically in at the moment, no-win situation on that particular one unless we are prepared to redefine what is regarded as the circulating
Media.
daily.
Yeah,
And
or
I
take some
don't know
response.
that we want to actually take on that particular issue, and that's what old pieces of legislation unfortunately
Thank you.
trap you into.
Okay, Trish, then Alex.
Is there any way that someone who has had a road closure exemption, for example this one, can avoid the cost by just rolling over it? It's already been approved previously.
Doug?
Through you, Chair, we have no mechanism for that. We would need a policy change to examine the fees.
Right. It just
Sorry,
seems
I
that
think
if
the
they've done
key-
it before and it's the same thing, it's a lot of cost, isn't it?
I think the key piece is that, you know, refamiliarising people with the fact that it's coming up each year, even if it might be an annual
Right.
item,
Yep.
to let people know that it is happening. And we obviously, that they are things that are occurring in the road corridor. It is a high-risk environment, and
Yeah.
therefore we do want to make
exactly.
sure that the community are aware.
Fair enough, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Alex, then Mayor Clark.
Thank you. We have a workshop next week on our submission to the electoral reform working group that Local Government New Zealand has put together. Why don't we have a discussion about the removal of public notices, or what constitutes a public notice, so that we can use LGNZ as the advocacy body to push for legislation change around that particular
Good idea.
piece of information.
Michael?
Thank you.
I will take council's direction on that. If you'd like to have that opportunity, then that's certainly something I can add into the workshop.
Yeah, there's nodding heads, so yeah, that'd be good suggestion. Thanks, Alex. Mayor Clark.
Yeah, I'll take up your challenge of raising that
Thank you.
with our masters in Wellington.
Okay, so we have a mover and a second, I think, on this, do we?
Yes.
So who is that, just to remind me? Councillor Ludlow and Soper. So recommendations are to receive the temporary road closure report, resolve to propose the event outline. The report will not impede traffic unreasonably, and approves the temporary closure on the 16th of May for this event. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Okay, we now have finished the items in public, so we need to move into public excluded for the reasons outlined on the, so it's rolling through, so that is in relation to protecting privacy of natural persons and making decisions around without prejudice or disadvantage through negotiations. So thank you for those that have joined us on live stream, and we'll take a short...
I'll move that way.
Yeah,
Oh, we need to move in a
yeah.
second.
I'll move that way.
Leslie and Darren, thank you. All those in favour?
Aye.
Right, we'll take a 2-minute recess if you need it to get